The bell over the 24-hour convenience store door gives a tired, metallic chirp as Grace Turner steps in from the rain, shoes squishing, a palm-warm fist of coins sweating in her hand. Outside, Seattle's night is a blurred aquarium of neon, green beer signs shimmering in puddles, bus taillights smearing red across the asphalt. Somewhere behind her, in the dented Corolla, her 5-year-old daughter, Lily, sleeps with her mouth open, whispering the same words she mumbled when Grace eased the car into the lot. Milk. That's why she's here at 1:13 a.m., standing under hard fluorescent light, counting small circles of metal that feel less like money than tiny apologies. A distant radio crackles about an incoming storm. The cashier watches her with that curious, pitying look Grace has learned to ignore. How did a woman who once wore a headset mic and owned a room end up counting change for a bottle of milk? The question hovers like fog, refusing to clear. She opens the cooler. Only one small bottle waits on an otherwise barren shelf, its label puckered from condensation. She presses the cold plastic to her cheek for half a second, a private ritual, then sets it on the counter. The cashier is a college kid in a hoodie zipped to the throat, chewing a cinnamon toothpick. His eyes flick to her coins. He starts to say the price, but she beats him to it, voice steady. $2.59. She spreads the coins, flat, neat rows, nickels like gray moons, tarnished pennies gone dark at the edges, 2 shiny quarters with birds on them that Lily loves to hold up to the window like stained glass. A quarter skitters off her fingertip, clinking against the counter and plopping into the small trash can by her knee. Muscle memory makes her reach in without hesitation, fingers brushing straw wrappers and torn lottery tickets. She fishes the coin out, wipes it on her coat, and lays it with the others. Precision. It's the last thing she still controls. The kid nods, rings her up. The register's drawer snicks open. A gust rattles the glass door. The lights flicker once, twice, before settling back into their buzz. The radio hiccups mid-forecast, then resumes, a monotone voice promising nastier weather before dawn. The bell chirps again. A man in a soaked hoodie shuffles in, cap pulled low, posture coiled. Grace doesn't stare. She unlearned that years ago. But she clocks him. No basket, no list, the drifting gait of someone deciding whether to buy or to take. Her own posture shifts. Shoulders angled, bottle tucked inside her coat, feet planted so she can pivot, the way she used to orient herself to a camera when demoing a product on stage. Rough night, the cashier murmurs to nobody, pulling the toothpick from his mouth. The man drifts beside the display of phone chargers, fingers skimming boxes like he's choosing a snake that won't bite. Outside, rain punches sideways. A streetlight pops and goes dark, and for a moment the windows are a mirror. Grace catches her reflection, the thrift store coat, damp hair, eyes too wide, and looks away quickly, as if that woman might ask her for something she can't give. Her phone buzzes, a weather alert, another buzz, a text from her neighbor. Power flickers on your block. All good? She tucks the phone away without replying. She should get back to the car, to Lily, to 3 more hours of sleep before the cafe shift. But the man in the hoodie peels away from the chargers and ambles toward the counter, eyes cutting across her face like a fingerprint. "You got cigarettes?" he asks the kid. "IDs for cigs," the cashier says, discovering a spine now that the counter's between them. The man sighs, then turns those quick, flat eyes on Grace. "You got change for the bus?" Her heart ticks faster. She can't afford to be unkind. She can't afford to be unwary. The bird quarters are warm in her pocket. Lily will want to trace her finger over the tiny feathers tomorrow morning. asking which state it is again. Grace curls her hand around them. Sorry, she says. One word, sanded smooth from overuse. He studies her a beat longer, then shrugs and yanks the door open. Rain shoves into the store on a gust. The bell protests. The man vanishes into the wet dark. Grace exhales. The kid drops his gaze back to the counter, embarrassed for both of them. She slides a dime into the wobbly donation cup for the homeless shelter. Someone has drawn a smiley face on the lid. The coin taps plastic and sets the crude grin wobbling. Thanks, the kid says like a real human, not a checkout machine. She pockets the receipt and steps into the storm. The parking lot stinks of oil and wet paper. Her car sits under the dead streetlight, as if the light failed on purpose to keep her small. She half trots, shielding the bottle inside her coat. Water sluices off the roof and down her neck in a cold finger. She unlocks the Corolla, slides in, and the cabin air hits her with the smell of wet wool, stale coffee, and the faint bubblegum of a sticker that refuses to die on the glove box. Lily stirs. Mama, she whispers, sleep-thick and hopeful. Right here, Bug, Grace says. She twists the cap. The tiny plastic crack is absurdly loud, a hymn in miniature. Lily wraps both hands around the bottle and drinks, eyes fluttering closed, trust pouring from her like warmth. Grace watches her, the round cheeks, the lopsided braid, and a memory blindsides her. The green room, 2 bright bulbs, a hand clamping her wrist, a voice freighted with embarrassment and entitlement. The bruise lasted a week. The apology lasted an hour. The lesson lasted longer. Be smaller, take up less air, make storms your problem. Her phone lights her jeans pocket again. Not weather this time. Email. The subject line floats like a ghost. Tomorrow's meeting, Caldwell Tech. For a second, the car tilts. Caldwell Tech is a name with gravity, a star she once orbited before burning up. She almost doesn't open it. Almost. The sender preview scrolls just enough. Ethan Caldwell. A siren lifts in the distance and stitches toward them, thin at first, then louder, closer. The storm drums harder on the roof. In the rear view, through the rain, she sees an ambulance wash the far end of the street with blinks of white. It takes the turn toward her block. Her building is in that direction. The part of her that runs on catastrophe, ever vigilant, bone-tired, kicks into gear. Lily finishes, solemnly hands the bottle back. Are we okay? She asks. Grace cups her cheek. The question is bigger than tonight, bigger than milk, bigger than the weather. We will be, she says, voice a steady keel. She starts the engine. The wipers drag and thump, 2 metronomes fighting to agree. She pulls out, following the thin river of headlights toward home. At the first red light, she steals another glance at the email notification, its glow needling her peripheral vision. The siren wails again, closer now, calling her street by name in a language only panic speaks. Grace grips the wheel, breathes in, breathes out, and hears the old voice of the stage in her head. What's happening? Why should I care? The questions she used to use to wake an audience up. What's happening is a storm that won't end. Why she should care is buckled in the back seat, safe for the moment, counting on her to choose the right next move. The light changes. She turns toward the sound and the email, both of them pulsing like beacons. The night narrows to a point ahead. Whatever waits at the end of the block, flickering power, a soaked paramedic, a message from an old life. Grace leans forward and meets it, one hand at 10 o'clock, the other at 2. The bottle cap small and perfect in her pocket, like a promise she can still keep. 2 years earlier, The air in Caldwell Tech's headquarters always carried a faint hum. Servers buried in glass-walled rooms, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, the soft rhythm of productivity. Grace Turner, then a marketing manager, moved through the maze of desks like a spark in dry grass. Her campaigns had teeth, unexpected taglines, visuals that startled people into looking twice, and the metrics to prove their worth. Her team adored her. She had a desk littered with sticky notes, coffee mugs from trade shows, and a small silver watch on her wrist, a wedding gift from Mark. Mark Turner had been charming in the early days, quick with a joke, steady with a hand on her lower back at events. He knew how to win a room, and in the tech world, that could be half the battle. But as Caldwell grew and competition sharpened, something in him shifted. His questions became critiques, his support conditional, his approval a currency she had to earn. At first, Grace told herself it was just stress, that the deadlines and investor meetings were sandpapering his patience. The first crack appeared under the bright glare of a product launch party. The venue was all brushed steel and glass, an orchestra of networking conversations swelling under chandeliers. Grace was presenting to a potential investor when she caught Mark's expression from across the room. Tight, unreadable. Later, backstage, under the dim glow of the green room bulbs, he gripped her wrist just hard enough to bruise. "You made me look foolish," he hissed, low enough that only the dust motes seemed to hear. That moment could have been dismissed as an isolated outburst. But Sophie Bennett, her colleague, had seen. She'd been heading toward Grace with a glass of champagne, only to pause in the doorway, watching. Sophie's eyes lingered just long enough to register the scene, and then slid away. By the time she stepped forward, she was smiling as if nothing had happened. That silence would sit in Grace's memory like a stone in a shoe. The months that followed turned the hum of the office into static. Mark began arriving unannounced at her floor, questioning her meetings, asking why certain men were in her contacts list. At home, the tension seeped into every corner, conversations truncated, laughter replaced by the hollow sound of utensils on plates. He'd lean in close when they fought, the edge in his voice colder than the rain slicking the city outside. Grace's breaking point came on another rainy night in Seattle. She stood in their kitchen, watching the storm blur the skyline through the window, Lily still unborn and shifting gently inside her. Mark was pacing, railing about a budget meeting, his voice swelling until it filled the space between them. Something in her, tired, bruised, but unbroken, clicked into place. She left quietly, the way you step off a moving walkway without stumbling. A backpack with essentials, her laptop, a folder of work she couldn't abandon. The wedding watch, cool and precise against her skin, which she later slipped into the back of a drawer like a piece of evidence she didn't yet know how to use. It wasn't a cinematic escape. No slammed doors, no shouting. Just the soft sound of her boots on wet pavement as she walked to a friend's borrowed car. The rain slicked her hair to her face, blurred the world into streaks of silver and gold. Every block she put between herself and that apartment felt like she was stepping off a map she'd been told was the only one that existed. The city didn't notice her leaving. Streetlights buzzed, taxis hissed through intersections. She kept walking, one hand over her stomach, the other curled tight around the strap of her bag. Somewhere in the dark, between the office she'd conquered and the home that had become a trap, Grace Turner started drawing a new map. It was a messy, unfinished sketch, more questions than answers. Where she'd live, how she'd pay rent, what she'd say to people when they asked why she left. But beneath it all, a thread of defiance hummed like the servers in Caldwell's glass rooms. She didn't know yet how costly that defiance would be, but she knew it was the only currency that mattered. In the months to come, she would trade that currency for survival, one bill at a time, until there was nothing left but the watch in the drawer, the baby in her arms, and the quiet certainty that some storms you don't wait out. You walk into them, head up, letting the rain wash the old map away. Morning starts before the sun figures itself out. Grace keys the front door of the book cafe at 5:12 a.m., the metal sighing like an old hinge in a storybook, and the alarm's shrill countdown dares her to remember the code. She does. She always does. Inside, the air holds last night's ghosts. Paper, dust, a hint of dark roast. She flicks on the pendant lamps one by one, little moons over mismatched tables, and the room becomes what the weather never is in Seattle. Warm, certain, almost kind. She moves by muscle memory, water in the boiler, filters, the hiss and bloom of the first espresso pull, a row of mugs pre-warmed like small, faithful hearts. She turns the chalkboard to open at 5:59, then checks her phone. 3 new emails from the landlord's portal, a cheerful reminder from the utility company, and a pharmacy notice that Lily's inhaler refill requires clarification from your provider. She files the last one under the mental tab, labeled later, that's grown into its own weather system. By 6:10, the first regulars arrive, trailing rain and opinions about the Mariners. She likes them, old union guys who sip black coffee and read paper newspapers like the world never digitized. The cafe hums, the grinder snarls, the milk pitcher sings, the register thunks open like a heartbeat. Grace fits herself into the rhythm the way you slip a key into a lock, carefully, without thinking too hard about what it keeps closed. "Morning, Grace," calls Pam from the bakery down the block, delivering 2 trays of cinnamon rolls that perfume the whole room. "Tell your girl the purple sprinkles got restocked." "Lily will stage a parade in your honor," Grace says, and it's not a joke. Lily will measure out her gratitude in stickers and very serious hugs. A door chime ting-tings as a bicyclist enters, cheeks ruddy, helmet hooked on one handlebar. He orders a double cappuccino and an oat milk latte to go, and Grace's hands flow through froth and heat as if she were made for this, instead of slides and stage lights. There's a peace here, honest and immediate, the kind that arrives disguised as exhaustion. She wears it gladly. It beats the old costume. Confidence thin as plastic. At 7:02, a woman in a navy blazer at the corner table asks for the Wi-Fi and mentions too brightly that she's between roles. At 7:15, a hurried dad asks for anything without dairy and forgets his scarf. At 7:21, a college kid pays with crumpled singles and tips in dimes, and Grace pretends not to notice the tremor in her own hand as she tucks the coins away. The register reports numbers that never quite add up to calm. Done right, service work hides the math. The bills arrive anyway. 2 calls blink at her on break. The first is Mr. Duarte, the building manager, with a message delivered in his "I hate this part" voice about small increases across units. The second is the nurse at Lily's clinic, explaining the insurance denial like a weather report. Atmospheric pressure, prior authorization, expect delays. Grace presses the phone tight to her ear, notes the hold music's tinny string section, and keeps her face neutral for the customers. Only her thumb, rubbing the wedding watch's ghost along her wrist bone, gives her away. Later she'll call again, then again, because persistence is cheaper than panic and works about as often. "Refill?" asks Hank, one of the union guys, hovering with his mug like a supplicant. "Bottomless as your optimism," she says, and he grins, proud she remembered he's the one who still believes the team's got a shot this year. Between pours, she restocks napkins and checks the small corkboard near the door. A flyer for free tax prep leans into a poster about a missing cat with one ear. Tucked behind them, half hidden, is a new business card someone slid there. Halstead Media. Sleek font, no address, just a website and a phone number. The name itches in her brain without context, like a song you almost place. She flattens the pen and lets the paper sit, refusing to be spooked by a piece of cardstock. At 8:03, the steam wand sputters. At 8:04, the machine throws an error. She kills power, breathes through the tiny lurch of dread, and restarts it the way the owner taught her. Patience, then prayer. The second try holds. A minor triumph, but she takes it. Small victories stack, and right now she needs a wall made of anything. "Mommy?" comes a whisper she hears even when she's alone. It's only in her head. Lily is at the neighbor's, breakfasting on purple sprinkled toast. But the memory's fresh. Last night's small voice in the Corolla, the milk bottle, the storm. She feels the shape of the question that always follows. Where's Daddy? And the answer she's worked down to a stone she can carry without choking. He's far away. The truth is complicated. So is the damage. The sentence fits in a child's hand. She holds it out, again and again. The mid-morning rush arrives like a flock all at once. She's a motion blur, calling tickets, tamping, steaming, timing. When a courier barrels in with a tower of boxes marked books, fragile, she reroutes a table to take the weight, and the navy blazer woman scoots her laptop, apologizing to no one in particular. A child drops a muffin. A latte art heart collapses into a question mark. Life, adjusted for spillage. The courier leaves a padded envelope with no return address, just Grace in block letters. She suspects a supplier invoice or a mistake, but the cafe is no place for curiosity. She slides it under the counter. The envelope hums in the back of her mind, the way a tooth does when you drink cold water. By noon, the rain returns with the confidence of a headliner and drums on the windows hard enough to make conversation go private. Grace steals a moment at the sink, elbows deep in a foam of plates and spoons, watching water run in perfect obedience to gravity. She would like to be water. She would like to rush somewhere without asking permission. Pam reappears, swapping out empty trays for full, and lowers her voice. "You okay, hun?" "Define okay," Grace says lightly. She doesn't want Pam's kindness to split her open. "We're trading up from hold the line to maybe gain a yard." Football metaphors. Must be bad, Pam says, amused and concerned in equal measure. "Tell Lily I've got a cookie with her name on it." She will. After school, they'll share it. Lily egalitarian about crumbs only until the last bite. The thought steadies her. The thought of bedtime does too. Clean pajamas, stories about brave rabbits. Her daughter's breath a small tide against her arm. When the line ebbs, she opens the padded envelope. Inside is a slim paperback, a galley copy of a business memoir with dog-eared ambition and a cover blurb from a CEO whose name makes her mouth dry. There's a post-it on the title page. "Thought you'd like this. Saw your campaigns back in the day. Keep going." No signature, no return address. The villain in her life is rarely a person you can confront. Most days it's a stack of invoices, a missing authorization, a memory with its hand on your wrist. But sometimes the world passes a note across the table and doesn't ask for anything back. She tucks the book on the shelf behind the register, where the staff keep their traded paperbacks, and glances outside. Across the street, Beyond a shimmer of rain and bus exhaust, a glass tower chases the low sky. The 32nd floor is invisible from here, but the building still looks like a promise written to other people. She feels that old ache, then files it under later with the pharmacy and the landlord and the dream of catching her breath. At 1:03, a pair of tourists wander in with damp maps and order hot chocolates like an antidote. At 1:07, the bank app pings, a reminder that the overdraft protection is not so protective. She swallows it, flips a mug, and keeps serving. Because this is what you do when you've been crossed off an invisible list. You write your name again, every day, in small, legible letters, until someone notices it's still there. She locks the front door at 2 for the midday lull, flips the sign to back in 20, and sits on a milk crate in the stockroom, back against sacks of beans, letting the quiet pool around her. Then her phone vibrates with a new email. Not a bill, not the clinic, something else. The subject line is neutral as a blank wall. Tomorrow. Meeting. She doesn't open it. Not yet. She stares at the words until they blur, then pockets the phone and stands, because the world runs on cups and hands and motion, and her next customer is pushing the door already. Looking up from the rain to meet her with a need she can fill in 12 ounces and a smile. Outside, the storm presses its face to the glass and fogs it with its breathing. Inside, Grace breathes back and keeps going. Coffees lined like small, sure decisions on a tray. Somewhere, far away and much too close, the past is checking its watch. For now, she is present. Hands steady, voice soft, doing the math that keeps her and Lily afloat, and pretending it's just steam rising instead of whatever else the day might be about to ask her to carry. The cafe was in that warm lull between the morning rush and the mid-afternoon trickle, steam softening the windows, the scent of cinnamon rolls lingering like a held note. Grace was rinsing the milk pitcher when a voice, low and confident, cut through the soft clatter of mugs. "Grace Turner? I thought I'd never see you again." The sound froze her mid-movement. It wasn't just the words. It was the cadence, the subtle weight of authority wrapped in familiarity. She turned, pitcher still in hand. Standing at the counter was Ethan Caldwell. Same immaculate suit lines, same steady eyes she remembered from boardrooms and all-hands meetings, though the hair at his temples now wore the faint frost of time. The last time she'd seen him had been in the glass elevator at Caldwell Tech, her reflection fading as the doors closed on a chapter she thought would never reopen. For a beat she didn't speak, letting the hiss of the espresso machine fill the air between them. "Ethan," she said finally, careful to smooth her voice. "This is unexpected." "I was in the neighborhood," he said with a half-smile that didn't look accidental. "Needed coffee, and maybe—" He glanced around the cafe. "Needed to see if the rumors were true." "What rumors?" she asked, trying to keep it light. "That you'd vanished into the city like smoke." She busied herself wiping the counter, a shield made of cloth and motion. "Not vanished, just redirected." He studied her for a moment longer, then leaned on the counter the way only someone accustomed to being listened to could. "I'm heading back to the office. I think you should come by. 32nd floor, tomorrow morning. We're starting something new. And I could use someone who knows how to see the edges of a thing before the rest of us do." Her stomach tightened. "I haven't worked corporate in 2 years, Ethan, and I'm not sure. You want to?" He finished for her. "Maybe not, but maybe you need to. I've read the metrics on your last campaigns. That eye of yours? It didn't go anywhere." A customer approached, breaking the moment, and Grace took their order as if it were the most urgent task of her life. Ethan waited, hands in his pockets, perfectly at ease in the pause. When she returned, he slid a matte black business card across the counter. No phone number, no title, just his name and the Caldwell Tech crest. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., he said. "Worst case, you drink our coffee and tell me no. Best case, you start writing the next part of your story." She glanced at the card, but didn't touch it. "What's the catch?" He smiled faintly, like someone appreciating a chess move. "The catch is, you'll want to say yes." With that, he turned, adjusting the cuff of his shirt as he left. The door chime's soft ting-ting was the only proof he'd been there at all. Grace stood still a moment longer, then slipped the card into the pocket of her apron. She told herself she wouldn't think about it, but of course she did. Every spare minute between pouring cappuccinos and stacking croissants. By closing time, the card felt like a stone she'd been carrying all day. She pulled it out once in the stockroom, tracing the embossed crest with her thumb. 32nd floor. That was the view from which the city looked like it could be held in a palm. That was also the altitude from which she'd fallen. That night, after Lily was asleep and the rain softened against the windows, Grace sat at the kitchen table with the card in front of her. The old part of her, the one who could pitch a campaign in a sentence and close a deal before lunch, leaned toward it. The cautious part, the one that had learned the cost of proximity to power, leaned back. She opened her laptop and typed Caldwell Tech into the search bar. Press releases, glowing profiles, sleek promotional videos filled the screen. But buried between the accolades was a headline that made her pulse quicken. Halstead Media lands major data contract, poaches key talent. The accompanying photo showed Sophie Bennett shaking hands with a Halstead executive. Sophie. That flash of her face in the green room years ago. The turned-away eyes. Grace stared at the photo until the edges blurred. The rain intensified. A reminder that storms in Seattle don't blow over. They settle in. She shut the laptop, her reflection ghosting the dark screen. Tomorrow, she told herself, she could walk into that glass tower and decide on her own terms. Or she could stay here, safe, small, unshaken. But she'd heard Ethan's voice under the offer. Not a request, not quite a challenge. Something in between. Something that suggested the past might not be done with her. She slid the card back into her bag and turned off the light. Upstairs, Lily murmured in her sleep. Grace stood at the foot of the stairs for a moment, listening before climbing to join her daughter. The storm rattled the window panes like fingers on glass. Somewhere in the dark, the 32nd floor waited, its view and its traps laid out in equal measure. And Grace knew that if she went, she wouldn't just be walking into an office. She'd be stepping back onto the kind of stage she'd promised herself she'd never return to, where the lights are bright, the stakes are high, and the shadows always hide someone watching. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., she would decide whether to step into them. Grace arrived at Caldwell Tech just before 9, hair still damp from a sprint under stubborn Seattle rain, palms prickling with a mix of adrenaline and something that felt dangerously like hope. The lobby's atrium was a glass cathedral that made the weather into stained glass. Sheets of water turned to wavering light on marble floors. A receptionist issued her a guest badge with the smooth efficiency of a dealer sliding a card across felt. The badge was white, temporary, and, if you were the sort to believe in omens, a reminder this was borrowed ground. Security ushered her through a short briefing. No external drives, no personal accounts on company machines, Keep your camera covers on unless cleared. She signed the acknowledgement, the pen lighter than she remembered. The elevator swallowed her and then expelled her onto 32, where the carpet softened her footsteps and the air smelled faintly of ozone the way expensive electronics do when they're awake and thinking about you. "Grace," Ethan said, waiting by a cluster of glass-walled huddle rooms. He didn't offer a handshake. He offered a lifeline disguised as a smile. "You're on Atria. Think of it as the nervous system for our next generation of products. We're still naming the public-facing thing, but internally, Atria." He walked her past a bank of monitors showing dashboards like constellations, nodes, edges, traffic pulsing along unseen arteries. Atria wasn't just an app. It was a lattice. It meant data, but also decisions. She recognized the shape of a thing that would make enemies. "Your lane," Ethan continued, "is narrative. How we translate this for humans without letting competitors reverse engineer our soul. I don't need safe. I need true. We're in a phase where the wrong story is a security risk." He left her with a lean laptop, a corporate email, and a team. Yash, security, all clipped consonants and careful eyes. Mina, product, spiral notebook filled with little drawings of rockets. And Julio, legal, fluent in both law and sarcasm. Grace listened, took notes, and found the groove she thought she'd worn out. The one where she asks the right questions and the room tilts toward her. By 10:30, they were in a working session, whiteboarding verbs and scrubbing jargon, when the meeting room door hissed and a visitor badge swept in on a navy sheath dress and a pair of perfect heels. "Sorry I'm late," said Sophie Bennett, her old colleague now carrying herself with the tensile ease of someone who'd solved for optics. "Traffic on First." For 1 second, Grace's past climbed up her throat and tried to speak. Then she smiled the way you smile at a mirror you don't owe anything to. Sophie. Sophie's badge read Halstead Media in sharp, purposeful type. The rival whose press releases had started ending shows. The company that had poached Caldwell talent like it was a blood sport. Sophie didn't flinch under the combined weight of old loyalties and present realities. She simply set a leather folio on the table and said, "We're exploring content partnerships, thought leadership, cross-pollination." Her gaze darted to Ethan, then back to Grace. And there it was, a flicker of something that might have been apology if you were feeling generous, or calculation if you weren't. The meeting turned into a choreography of guarded sharing. Julio ran the non-disclosure like a prayer. Mina kept her slides general, the way you do when you're sketching a skyline, but you don't intend to hand over the blueprints. Grace contributed a scaffolding narrative, human stakes, practical examples, metaphors that could carry weight without revealing the weight-bearing walls. Through it all, she watched Sophie. The other woman's poise was a well-kept blade, polished, never idle. During a coffee break, Sophie drifted beside her at the window, the city pooling below like mercury. "You look good, Grace," she said. "I mean it." "Good as a word," Grace said, keeping her tone friendly enough to pass inspection. "You with Halstead now?" "Consulting. Building a division. It's interesting." A beat. "I heard you left. I'm glad you landed." There were 1,000 honest replies. "You saw and looked away. I still count the days by the bruised timeline. I don't need your absolution. But honesty is a currency you spend where it buys something." Grace pocketed hers. "Thanks," she said simply. They returned to the table. Ethan adjourned at noon with a cleanly phrased thank you and the kind of smile that reveals nothing you don't want revealed. Sophie gathered her folio. At the door, she looked back, an expression on her face that could be read like a headline if you'd ever worked in PR. Developing. After lunch, Grace settled at her assigned desk in a bullpen, where people typed with the briskness of weather fronts. She opened her new corporate inbox to find the first trickle of internal threads. Mina had sent her a doc to revise. Yash had added her to a secure channel labeled Atria Red Team Narrative. The subject line's a cadence of threat model, social engineering, press risk. She set to work and felt the old pleasure of a precise sentence landing in the exact right spot, like a puzzle piece flipping and sliding and finally locking. At 1:37 p.m., an email popped into her inbox from her own address. Subject: Atria Overview. Sent to external list including a Halstead catch-all and 2 journalists whose names made Julio's hand twitch in legal meetings. The message body was a brief but damaging summary, a skeleton that, with flesh, could have walked. Her pulse dropped to her ankles. The laptop was closed when she'd been in the meeting. She hadn't written this. She clicked headers. Spoofing, compromised account. The sweat behind her knees felt arctic as she stood and crossed to Yash's desk. Fire, she said quietly, holding the screen at an angle only he could see. His eyes moved fast. He picked up his phone, spoke 2 sentences into a secure line, and then typed a command sequence that blurred. We saw the outbound, he said, without wasting breath on comfort. Pulling logs. Your token shows a login from here, then an API hit that shouldn't be available at your access level. Could be a session hijack. Could be a ghosted machine. I didn't, she started, then stopped. He knew. He nodded once. Sit tight. Change your password. I'll kill your sessions. He slid her a temporary loaner like a bartender setting down water for someone who'd stood too fast. Don't touch your inbox unless you're with me. By 2:10, rumors had already sluiced through the floor with the sly speed of a broken pipe. Eyebrows pitched tense. Conversations turned private. This is how a reputation erodes. Not by proof, but by proximity to a story someone else wants to tell. She could feel the narrative hardening around her like wet plaster. Grace, the comeback hire. Grace, the leak. Fast arcs are entertaining. Truth is an acquired taste. Ethan found her near the stairwell, where she'd gone to breathe air that didn't know her name. We're on it, he said, tone steady enough to stand on. Security's tracing. Legal's quarantined the thread. Say nothing broad. Say only this, if asked. We're investigating an anomalous activity on a shared system. Shared? She asked, tasting the word for its usefulness. True enough we can say it. Vague enough it buys us time. He held her gaze. If you need to get Lily, go. I'll call if we need you back. There it was, the place her life was always going to split, between the tower and the kitchen table, between Atria and bedtime. She's at aftercare, Grace said. I'm okay. You're not, he said, not unkindly. But you will be. By late afternoon, a tech blog posted a blind item about internal turbulence at a Seattle firm, and a Slack channel in a corner of the internet spun that into Caldwell, then into Atria, then into Grace because stories love a face. Her phone buzzed with a text from Pam. Saw something online. You okay? And another from the neighbor who watched Lily. All good here. Do you need me later? Grace typed yes, thank you, an hour, then deleted the second ask and settled for a smile emoji and a promise of cookies. At 4:03, Yash appeared at her desk with a screenshot. Her account had sent the message at 1:37 p.m., but the IP belonged to a device on the 28th floor. Different subnet, he said. Different badge domain. You weren't there. "What's on 28?" she asked. "Contractors, overflow, some vendor hot desks," he said. "Halstead's liaison used a conference room there this morning while waiting for us." A beat. "And others." The building hummed, indifferent and alive. Grace remembered Sophie's glance, developing, and felt the trap click a tooth tighter. She also felt something else. The old engine turning over. Not the one that runs on fear, but the one that runs on refusal. "Teach me the map," she said to Yash. "Show me how this could have been done. If someone wanted to borrow my face for their story, what would they need?" He studied her, then nodded, already sketching the steps. Social engineering on a shared printer queue. QR code on a conference room placard that rerouted SSO. A cloned access portal that looked exactly like the real thing if you were in a hurry and not suspicious enough. As he talked, Grace wrote, "Not for marketing, not yet, but for war." The antagonist wasn't just a person. It was a system of shortcuts and ego and the thousand small ways busy people become the easiest targets. She underlined a sentence in her notebook. "We don't just sell security, we practice humility." At 5:12, as the office emptied into elevators and raincoats, Ethan stopped by her desk again. His phone lit up with a call he silenced before it could speak. "We'll pick up in the morning," he said. "We'll fix it." "And if it was an inside job?" she asked, not bothering to sand down the question. "Then we find the inside," he said. "And we make it outside." On the way out, she paused by the glass that made the city into a moving painting. Somewhere down there, the cafe would be turning its sign to closed. Somewhere across town, Lily would be making a paper crown and insisting it was for bedtime. And somewhere in the building, 28 or a floor conveniently adjacent, someone had touched her life with 2 keystrokes and called it nothing. The elevator's doors began to close. A figure moved in the gap, a walk she knew before her brain could place it, a silhouette with edges she'd learned to avoid. The doors sealed. The car descended. Grace stood very still as gravity pressed a hand to the center of her chest. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would ask to see 28. She would walk the floor where her name had been borrowed. And if the past was waiting there behind a false name and a visitor badge, well, storms teach you how to hold the wheel. The lobby opened around her like a verdict. Outside, the rain was still trying to write the city into something else. Grace stepped into it, badge in her pocket, questions in her bag, a plan sketching itself in the margins the way a map does when you realize the compass is yours. The 28th floor was colder than the rest of the building, and not just in temperature. Grace could feel it in the way the air carried a faint hum, different HVAC rhythm, different smell, faintly chemical, like new carpet over secrets. The lighting was softer, the kind designed for client presentations, not for the grind of actual work. She'd convinced Yash to walk her through under the pretense of understanding the full building network. He'd swiped them in with his security badge, muttering something about vendor compliance checks. The hallways were quieter here, doors marked with paper signs. Overflow workspace, vendor lab, conference B. As they turned a corner, Grace saw him. It wasn't the face. He was bent over a laptop, hoodie hood up, but the posture. That slight forward lean when reading, the subtle shift of his weight when someone passed too close. And then, as if her mind needed proof, he glanced toward the door. The eyes were shadowed by the hood, but the set of his jaw, sharp, familiar, once pressed to her ear with whispered promises, was unmistakable. Mark. She almost spoke his name. Almost, But Mark's gaze flicked past her without recognition, or maybe with deliberate dismissal. Her pulse spiked anyway, heart slamming like it was trying to break out of her ribs. She caught herself gripping the edge of the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. "Hey," Yash murmured, sensing her freeze. "You okay?" She swallowed, eyes locked on the man at the desk. "Who's that?" "Contractor," Yash said. "On Halstead's payroll, temporary clearance. Supposed to be off-site most of the time, but they've been using this space since the storm knocked out one of their offices." Mark's fingers moved across the keyboard like a magician hiding the coin. He never looked up again, but Grace's skin prickled with the certainty that he knew she was there. Yash ushered her on, giving a quick tour of the floor layout. Grace's mind wasn't on the conference room names or the network drops. It was replaying that half-second of eye contact, the way the air had gone thin. When they returned to 32, Ethan was waiting outside her cubicle. "Walk with me," he said, his voice lower than usual. They took the stairs down to the executive lounge, a space all warm wood and floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a circuit board under glass. Ethan closed the door behind them. "I wasn't going to tell you until we had more," he said. "But since you just toured 28, I need you to hear this from me." He set a folder on the coffee table between them. Inside were stills from security footage. Mark, clean-shaven, hair shorter, entering the building with a Halstead badge under the name Daniel Harker. There were logs, system access requests that shouldn't have been his to make, notes about restricted areas visited without escort. "I know who he is," Ethan said quietly. "I also know what he was to you, and I'm telling you now. He's here with backing from the Halstead family. If you don't clear your name fast, the trail of evidence will lead straight to you." Grace stared at the photos. Mark, Daniel, was leaning casually against a reception desk in one, swiping a badge in another. He looked like he belonged. That was his gift, wasn't it? To make intrusion look like invitation. Ethan leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "This project is worth more than either of us wants to say out loud. Halstead's been trying to get inside for months. If they can pin a leak on you, they get to kill Atria's credibility and take us to court. Either way, we lose. You lose worse." She looked up. "Why are you telling me this instead of just cutting me loose?" "Because I don't think you did it," Ethan said simply. "And because I've played this game long enough to know a setup when I see one." Grace wanted to believe him, but believing meant stepping into a fight she'd promised herself she'd never fight again. Against Mark's games, against a company that could swallow her whole if it needed to. "What happens if we go after him?" she asked. Ethan's mouth curved in something between a smile and a warning. "Once we start, there's no going back. He'll know you're onto him. Halstead will dig up every inch of your past to make sure you can't stand. And it won't stop until one of you is out of the game entirely." The words sat between them like a loaded weapon. She thought of Lily, of bedtime stories and purple sprinkles, of the way her daughter's small hand fit inside hers like a puzzle piece. She thought of her kitchen table, the unpaid bills in a neat stack, the life she'd built on the quiet side of the storm. And she thought of Mark's eyes under that hood, sharp and calculating, the same as the day she'd walked out. Ethan watched her wrestle with it. "You have until tomorrow morning," he said. "Stay on the sidelines and hope we can clear this without you. Or step in and help me pull the thread. But once you pull, everything unravels," she finished for him. He nodded once. "Sometimes that's the point." Grace left the lounge with the folder under her arm, feeling its weight like it was made of lead. The elevator ride up felt longer than the descent, the mirrored walls throwing her reflection back at her from every angle. At her desk, she opened the folder again. The stills, the logs, the timestamps, they weren't just evidence. They were an invitation, a dare. Mark was here, moving under a false name, backed by the very people trying to destroy her second chance. The same man who had once controlled the air she breathed was now trying to take the ground she stood on. And the part that scared her most wasn't that he might succeed. It was that a small, sharp part of her wanted him to know she'd seen him, and that she wasn't going to run this time. The rain was starting again, tapping the glass like a countdown clock. Tomorrow, she would choose. Stay in the fragile safety she'd built, or walk straight into the storm and make it hers. Rain makes a sound, like paper tearing when it hits the old awning over Grace's apartment. The storm is back with teeth. Sheets of water angling sideways, gutters choking. The street a black ribbon flickering with siren light somewhere far off. Lily is asleep in a fort she insisted on building out of couch cushions and a dotted quilt. A lamp burns low in the kitchen, amber and steady, while Grace stands at the sink and watches the window blur. She tells herself she's only staying upright to finish the dishes. She knows she's waiting for the night to tell her what kind of story it wants to be. The knock comes soft, then twice again. Harder. Not a neighbor. No cheerful sing-song of her name. Grace dries her hands on a towel and moves on bare feet, feeling more burglar than host in her own hallway. She glances through the peephole and stops with her breath held in her throat. Sophie Bennett, soaked to the scalp, mascara ghosting at the edges, stands on the landing in a navy trench that's given up pretending to keep anything dry. She looks like an exclamation mark the rain forgot to finish. For 2 seconds, Grace thinks about not opening the door. Not tonight. Not like this. Not when the last time they saw each other, a rivalry wore designer heels and a Halstead badge. Grace unlocks and unlatches because she has never not opened a door to someone who looked like that. "Hi," Sophie says, as if this is coffee hour. Her voice is the exact pitch you use when you're trying not to wake a sleeping child. "Can I?" She swallows whatever the next word was, nods toward the inside. "Just 10 minutes." Grace steps aside. The hallway light throws rain slick onto the cheap wood floor. Sophie peels out of the trench and stands there, thinner than Grace remembers, the bones in her wrists a little too explicit. "Lily's asleep," Grace whispers, because that seems like the only boundary available. "Keep it down." "I know," Sophie says. "I remember her birthday is in spring." A flick of a smile that isn't a smile. "I remember more than I wanted to." They take the kitchen like a truce line. Grace pours 2 mugs of tea because it is easier to make a ritual than to make sense of this. Sophie cups hers like a person who needs a reason to stay still. For a long moment, only the storm does the talking. "I should have said something," Sophie says at last, eyes on the steam. "Back then, in the green room, I saw his hand on your wrist. I saw the bruise after. I did the math and then I set the equation on fire because it didn't fit the story I wanted to be inside." She looks up, mouth tight. "I'm sorry." The apology lands between them like a coin. Real, small, not nearly enough to pay the debt, but proof some currency still exists. Grace does not pick it up. She will later, maybe when her hands aren't full of everything else. "Why are you here?" she says, and makes it a statement on purpose. Sophie opens her bag. For a second, Grace expects a weapon made of words, a legal letter, a polished threat on heavy stock. What Sophie sets on the table is worse in its humility. A clear plastic folder, a gray thumb drive on a crimson lanyard, a spiral notebook with the first 5 pages torn out. "I brought receipts," Sophie says, "and a confession." Grace's heartbeat ticks toward the window and back. She does not touch the folder. "What kind?" "The kind that can save you," Sophie says. "And, if we're lucky, burn him." Sophie starts laying out paper like cards in a game nobody wins. A printout of an internal Halstead memo flagging coordinated narrative disruption as a tactic. A screenshot of a DocuSign envelope created with Grace's name, time-stamped at an hour Grace was on a video call with Mina. A certificate chain that looks legitimate until you know where to squint. A Slack export with a line from an account labeled D. Harker dropping a link to a revised vendor scope that rewires liability straight to Grace's corporate address. There's a photo, grainy but viable, of Mark, Daniel Harker, standing at a printer on the 28th floor, one hand braced like he owns gravity, the other catching a stack of freshly spat pages. "He forged my signature," Grace says, because her mouth needs to wrap itself around the shape of the thing. "He forged your digital signature," Sophie corrects, flat. "He cloned the authentication flow. He spun up a mock SSO screen, perfect typography, right favicon, the whole seduction, and sent the link from a subdomain that looks like it belongs to Caldwell if you're scanning on your phone and already late to a meeting. Then he used the stolen token to authorize the DocuSign envelope and push it through an internal alias only he and one other person had access to." She pushes the thumb drive across the table. Logs, screenshots, and the original files he forged before he converted them to PDFs. Grace makes her hands behave and reaches for the drive. "How do you have this?" "I worked on the strategy deck they used to sell the plan to Halstead," Sophie says, each word as if it's costing something. "2 decks, actually. The sanitized one, buzzwords, trend lines, and the real one. Daniel, Mark, he kept his fatal flaw. He thinks the smartest person in the room is the one who can't be traced. But he needed someone like me to make his sabotage coherent. He mistook that for loyalty. And you," Grace says, soft, dangerous, "were loyal." Sophie doesn't try to dodge. "I was ambitious. I told myself what a lot of us tell ourselves. If I don't do it, someone else will. I told myself Halstead would only aim at Ethan and the board, not at you. I told myself 1,000 little not my problems until they stacked high enough to block out the sun." She bites the inside of her cheek until color returns to her face. "Then your name showed up in the rumor mill, and the angle shifted, and I could see the bruise again. I could see me standing in a doorway, choosing silence." Grace leans back and lets the heat from the mug make an argument for compassion. It doesn't win. It earns a continuance. "What do you want in return?" she asks. Sophie looks startled, then something like relief crosses her face. Of course, Grace still knows how to close. "I want out," she says. "Halstead's family will turn on me when this goes public. They'll make sure I never consult again. I don't need you to rescue me. I need you to make sure the story we put out ends with the right people holding the bag." "Why me?" Grace asks. "Why not Ethan? Or the SEC? Or Mina? Why my kitchen table in the middle of a storm?" "Because this starts with you, and it needs to end with you not being a footnote in your own life," Sophie says. And it's so on the nose, Grace almost laughs. "And because I wanted to tell you, face to face, that I saw and I failed you once, I won't fail you twice." Outside, the wind lifts a trash can lid and lets it slam. In the living room, Lily turns over and sighs, her small hand thumping the couch cushion wall of her fort, still dreaming herself safe. Grace watches Sophie and thinks about villainy, the kind with a human face and a charm bracelet of justifications, and the other kind made of systems that reward you for not looking too closely. "Say I take this," Grace says, tapping the drive with a fingernail. "Say I bring it to Ethan in the morning, and we go to legal, and we go to security, and we light a match. What happens to you?" Sophie's smile is a cut. "I get to sleep for the first time in months," she says. "And I get to live with whatever comes next, without needing to lie about who I was in this story." Lightning whitens the room for a flash. When the darkness returns, it does so thicker, as if insulted. Grace nods once, a quarterback taking a snap she didn't call but can't afford to fumble. "Then let's do it right," she says. "Chain of custody, redundancies. You're not the only one with a drawer full of receipts." They work in whispers, in the subtle ballet of mothers and conspirators, plugging the drive into an old laptop not connected to anything, photographing every page and sending nothing, writing a list of hash values like a spell against tampering. Sophie shows her how the forged DocuSign certificate diverges 3 decimal points in if you know where to look. Grace writes the explanation in plain English, as if she's trying to explain to Lily why some wolves wear sheep suits. At the door, Sophie hesitates, trench back on and heavy with rain. "There's one more thing," she says. "If he knows I flipped, he'll come at you through the only door you never lock." Grace's spine goes cold. "Lily." Sophie nods, steady. "Not him, directly. He's too theatrical for that. He'll use noise, blog posts, concerned parents at school, a whisper about neglect. It's how Halstead works. They don't need to be right. They need to stink up the air." Grace puts a hand on the doorframe because the world tilted and nobody asked permission. "Then we hold our breath," she says, "and we open the windows." Sophie almost smiles. "You always were better with the line that makes the room remember. I should have followed your lead." She dabs at her cheeks like the rain got inside. "I'm sorry, Grace," she says again, smaller. "Don't be sorry," Grace says, and hears her own voice like it belongs to someone who didn't spend a year learning how to be smaller. "Be useful. Tonight you were." Sophie nods, turns, and takes the stairs 2 at a time, a shadow swallowed by weather. Grace closes the door and stands with her forehead against it for a full 10 seconds, because that's how long it takes to decide not to cry. Her phone, face down on the table, buzzes once. Unknown number. She flips it and reads, "Nice little apartment. See you at work, G. No signature. No need." She silences the screen, checks Lily, cheeks flushed, the damp crescent of a curl pasted to her forehead, and tucks the quilt tighter around her shoulders. In the kitchen, she puts the plastic folder and the drive into the bread box, because nobody ever steals bread. When the storm breathes against the windows again, she breathes back, counting to 4 on the inhale, 6 on the exhale. The way the clinic taught her after Lily was born, and panic learned her address. Then she sits at the table and begins to write. Not the press release, not yet, but the story she will force the world to say out loud. Names, times, the exact moment a forged envelope turned into a noose, and how she slipped it off. The villain thinks he's drawing the map. He doesn't see the pencil in her hand. By dawn, a stack of notes waits like kindling. And in the quiet between thunder and coffee, Grace understands the new shape of the fight. Not just for her job or her name, but for the part of herself that refuses to be a cautionary tale. She looks at the closed bread box and says, to the empty room and to the storm, and to anyone listening on the other side of the wall, tomorrow. Then she kills the light. The rain keeps talking to the city like a secret it wants to tell louder. Somewhere inside it, a siren winds up and aims toward her block. Grace doesn't know yet that by afternoon she will be running toward a school nurse with a thermometer and a scared voice on the line. For now, the night is doing what nights do: keeping score. The call comes just after 2 in the afternoon, slicing through the low hum of the waterfront like a shard of ice. Grace is standing by the rail, watching gulls strafe the choppy water, when her phone buzzes with the school's number. "Miss Turner?" It's the nurse, her voice brisk but edged with worry. "Lily's running a high fever, over 103. She says her chest feels tight. I think you should come right away." The words hit like a shove. Grace doesn't even remember ending the call. 1 second she's on the pier. The next, she's sprinting through the rain, shoes slapping water, her tote bag thudding against her side. The city blurs into shapes and colors. Orange construction cones, gray umbrellas, the green smear of a bus she doesn't wait to catch. By the time she reaches the school, she's drenched. The front office smells faintly of disinfectant and wet wool. The nurse meets her at the door, a small bundle of blankets in her arms. "Hey, Bug," Grace says softly, brushing damp hair from Lily's forehead. Lily's eyes are glassy, her skin pale except for 2 fever-bright spots on her cheeks. She leans into Grace's chest without a word. "She's been coughing on and off since lunch," the nurse says, handing over a plastic bag with Lily's water bottle and homework folder. "If it gets worse, don't wait, urgent care or the ER." Grace nods, already shifting Lily's weight so she can hold her close and still keep one arm free. The fever's heat seeps into her through the layers, a living reminder of how small her daughter is, how much can go wrong in the time it takes to answer an email. Outside, the rain is relentless. Grace half runs, half walks the 6 blocks home, head down against the wind. Lily murmurs now and then, the fragments of fever dreams, something about purple sprinkles, something about the fort still waiting in the living room. Grace murmurs back, promises she can't control but needs to make anyway. "You'll be okay. I've got you. Almost home." In the apartment, she tucks Lily into the couch fort with extra blankets, sets a pot of water to boil for tea, and fetches the emergency inhaler from the kitchen drawer. Lily's breathing evens a little after 2 puffs, though the heat radiating from her skin hasn't eased. Grace takes her temperature, 103.5, and fights down the spiral of what-ifs clawing at her. She texts Pam from the cafe. "Lily's sick. I can't cover the shift tomorrow." Pam replies almost instantly, "Don't even think about it. Just take care of her." Grace sends a thank you emoji, then flips her phone face down so she won't see the corporate notifications. But the phone buzzes again almost immediately. Ethan. She lets it go to voicemail, then listens to it over the hiss of the kettle. "Grace, it's moving faster than I thought. Security traced the credential spoof to a machine that's already been wiped. I need you in tomorrow if you're up to it. We've got one shot at nailing this down before the board takes over. Call me." She closes her eyes. The timing is obscene. She can't leave Lily, but she can't walk away from the chance to end this either. A coughing fit pulls her back to the couch. She rubs circles on Lily's back until it subsides. "You're gonna be fine, Bug," she whispers. Lily tilts her head up, eyes hazy. "Promise?" Grace swallows hard. "Promise." They pass the rest of the afternoon in a bubble of tea, cool washcloths, and half-watched cartoons. Outside, the storm tightens its grip on the city. The streetlights come on early, halos in the rain. Somewhere in the distance, A freight train moans, a sound Grace has always associated with departures, even when she's not the one leaving. As evening settles, Lily dozes, her small hand curled around Grace's thumb. Grace thinks about Sophie's warning the night before, how Halstead fights dirty, how they go after the part of you you can't defend without bleeding everywhere. And she realizes something with a clarity that's almost physical. Mark isn't the biggest threat anymore. Fear is. The kind that makes you hesitate when you should run forward. When Lily stirs, Grace offers sips of water and a slice of toast, then helps her back under the blankets. She checks her phone while the kettle refills. Another text from Ethan. If you can't be here in person, send me whatever Sophie gave you. Grace looks toward the bread box where the folder and thumb drive are hidden. She could send them, wash her hands of the rest, but something in her balks. If she's going to hand over the proof, she wants to be in the room when it hits the table. She wants to see Mark's face when the ground gives way under him. By 9, Lily is sleeping again, fever down a notch. Grace sits at the kitchen table with her notebook, writing out a plan. Not just for tomorrow, but for the hours between now and then. Get Lily's neighbor to cover the morning, pack the evidence, take the earliest bus downtown. Be in Ethan's office before the meeting starts. The rain drums on the windows, steady and insistent. Grace feels the pull of exhaustion but resists it. Tonight is the last night she'll spend wondering if she should step fully into this fight. She looks over at the couch fort, at the small rise and fall of Lily's breathing. Her greatest fear isn't Mark or Halstead. It's letting Lily grow up with a mother who teaches her that the safest choice is silence. Grace closes the notebook, tucks it under the folder in the bread box, and switches off the kitchen light. She stands for a moment in the dark, listening to the storm. Then she goes to bed, not to rest, but to wait for morning. The city is a wet mirror the next morning, every curb a thin river, every bus stop a glass terrarium fogged with breath. Grace leaves Lily with the neighbor, a thank you and a packet of purple sprinkles passed between hands like contraband, then steps into the rain with a backpack that feels heavier than its size should allow. Inside, the plastic folder, the thumb drive, a notebook inked with chain of custody notes and times precise enough to make a lawyer smile. She walks faster than the crosswalk countdown approves, heart thudding a double-time beat that says this is the hour. The Caldwell lobby is a cool cathedral against the storm, marble slick as a thought you can't quite grip. Security scans her badge. The turnstile opens like a mouth. By the time the elevator exhales her onto 32, she's rain-damp and steady-eyed. Boardroom B, Ethan says, meeting her halfway, voice pitched low. 10 minutes. 3, she counters, and he nods like he expected that answer. They triage in his office. Yash already waiting, jaw set. Mina with her spiral notebook. Julio from legal with a leather folio and the kind of expression you wear to funerals and IPOs. Grace sets the folder down, opens the breadbox archive onto the desk, and the room's air changes. Like the moment a theater goes dark and everyone leans forward at once. Walk us through it, Ethan says. No slides, Grace says. We keep this tactile. She starts with the map that matters. Dates, times, IPs, how an SSO clone with perfect typography and the right favicon lured harried staff, how a stolen token rode an internal alias to authorize a DocuSign envelope in her name. She points to the forged certificate chain and the place it deviates 3 decimal points in if you know where to squint. She shows them the revised vendor scope link seeded from D. Harker in a Slack export, and the security cam still of Mark, Daniel Harker. catching printed pages on 28 with a hand that assumes gravity will cooperate. Her notes read like a ballistics report on a story. Yash's eyes flick, fast and hungry. "You've got raw logs? Stamped and hashed," she says, sliding the thumb drive across. "Screenshots with device IDs and the original files he edited before converting to PDFs." Julio leans in, pen already moving. "Chain of custody?" She taps the notebook. "Here, photo timestamps, hashes written twice in 2 inks, copies sealed and unconnected to any network." "Of course you thought like a lawyer," Mina says, half relief, half awe. Grace keeps going. "The angle wasn't just to leak, it was to rewire liability. The forged envelope routes culpability through my account if our red team narrative ever leaked. The press story writes itself. Come back higher with a motive, competitor with plausible deniability. If we slow walk this, the rumor hardens first, then the evidence looks like a scramble." Ethan studies her face like it's a dashboard. "And the proof ties to Halstead." She turns a page. "A clean chain would stop short. But our saboteur is theatrical. He pitched it internally at Halstead. 2 decks, 1 sanitized strategy, 1 real. Sophie had access to both." She meets Julio's eyes. She's confessed participation and provided the originals. Julio's stylus goes still. "Sophie Bennett is cooperating?" "She's done being furniture in rooms where harm happens at scale," Grace says. "She knows Halstead will aim to discredit her. She wanted this to land as evidence, not gossip." There's a knock. The boardroom door opens. 2 directors slide into seats, rain still pearled on expensive wool. A third joins via video, the camera set at an angle that makes him look like a painting that sees you back. Ethan doesn't stall. He introduces the emergency session with a sentence that says more than it reveals, then gestures to Grace. She stands in a light she used to live under, palms open on the table's edge, and tells it straight. No fireworks, no rhetorical sugar. Just the scaffolding that holds the truth upright. Names, times, logs, the moral math. At forged DocuSign, one director makes a small sound. At internal alias, another stops taking notes and just listens. Yash plugs in the thumb drive and mirrors a secure laptop to the wall. File trees, hash values, a short video that captures the cloned SSO page blinking in a sandbox. Julio speaks prima facie and malicious interference like pressure points. Halfway through, the boardroom door opens again. Sophie slips in, hair damp from the weather, blazer too light for war but worn like armor. She doesn't sit. She places a sealed courier envelope in front of Julio and says, voice even, "Supplemental exhibits, metadata, and a private Slack archive from Halstead's internal task force. You'll want page 6. She doesn't look at Grace because that would turn the moment into something smaller than it is. Julio slides out page 6, eyebrows lifting. This is explicit. The text on the printed screenshot is a single line in a channel labeled Horizon Ops. Use GT as the narrative fulcrum. Her story buys press cycles. Below it, a thread from D. Harker linking the mocked SSO domain and a list of talking points, concerned parent angle, that reads like a smear campaign in bullet form. Concerned parent? One director says, face sharpening. They were already sniffing at Lily's school, Grace says, steady. We cut off the oxygen now. Silence takes the room for 3 beats, the kind that calibrates a future. Then the remote director clears his throat. What do you need from this board? Permission to escalate externally, Ethan says. Law enforcement on the credential forgery. A civil action for tortious interference. Possibly RICO if the pattern holds. Communications authority, to go on the record with what we can say without compromising the criminal case. Eyes swing to Grace. She doesn't flinch. We also need to reverse the narrative. We tell the story before it's told about us. We make the villain explain how a concerned parent campaign got typed by the same hands that spoofed our login. And we put faces to the system, because systems hide in abstractions and keep winning there. Risk? A director asks. Short-term volatility, long-term credibility? Julio answers automatically. And the alternative is letting the leak label stick and bargaining from a defensive crouch. Do it, the remote director says. The others nod, one after another, like dominoes that want to fall. But stay precise. The door opens yet again. The air pressure changes the way it does when someone brings weather with them. Mark, no hood this time, the Daniel Harker badge fresh and straight, steps in with a practiced apology, half-smile, and an innocuous, "Am I late?" As if meetings rearrange themselves around his arrival, as if he wasn't the center of this particular storm. The temperature drops a degree in Grace's blood. She does not sit. Neither does he. For a heartbeat, the boardroom holds two narratives. The one where charm wins and the one where evidence does. She chooses the second and slides the printed page 6 across the table to him with 2 fingers. He doesn't touch it. He reads it upside down, mouth barely moving. Out of context, he says, friendly, measured. Slack is performative. We spitball. Spitball a felony? Yash says, almost amused. Mark chuckles, a sound designed to make the room feel like it's overreacting. We're all under a lot of pressure. Lines blur. Grace angles the security still so the light hits right. Mark at the 28th floor printer, hand-braced, casual sovereignty and posture. She taps the timestamp. This is the minute my account sent a forged envelope. His eyes flick to the photo. The performance hiccups. Barely. But enough. Ethan's voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Daniel, please surrender your badge. Security will escort you to retrieve personal items. Legal will be in touch. I'm a contractor, Mark says lightly, but his gaze pins Grace as if he could staple her to the table. You can't, We can, Julio says, sliding a templated termination letter into the center of the table like a dealer turning a card. And we are. Security appears with the efficiency of a curtain drop. Mark laughs, the sound emptier now, and before he turns to go, he leans, just a fraction, into Grace's space. It's not a touch. It's the echo of one. You never did learn to stay small, he murmurs, soft enough for only her to hear. She tilts her head, lets him see the thing he failed to extinguish. I learned to bring receipts, she says, equally soft. They're allergic to sunlight. He's gone in a sweep of black umbrella and wet shoe squeak. The room exhales as if it had been bracing without noticing. Sophie sits at last, hands trembling in a way only Grace sees. Yash is already carving up tasks like a surgeon: preserve, escalate, lock. Mina is drawing the comms tree in tidy arrows. Julio is on the phone with a DA who answers on the first ring. Ethan steps closer to Grace, the noise of controlled crisis rising around them like a tide. Up close, he looks the way leaders look when they've chosen a fight and intend to win it. Tired, electric, absolutely present. You just saved more than this company. You saved yourself, he says, not for the room, not for the board minutes, but for the person who walked in from the rain with a backpack full of evidence and a steadier heart than yesterday. And for the first time in a long time, Grace lets the words land. Not as a benediction, not as a pitch, but as a fact she built with her own hands. Outside the glass, the storm lifts its face from the city and looks elsewhere. Inside, the work accelerates. Statements drafted, subpoenas drafted, a press strategy that doesn't flinch from the word forgery. Grace writes the opening line in a calm, camera-ready voice. We uncovered and stopped a coordinated attempt to compromise our systems and our people. She adds the sentence she promised herself she would. We refuse to be the story told about us. When she finally sits, it's because the room has more chairs than battles left for the hour. Her phone lights with a text from the neighbor. Lily's fever's down. She's asking about the cookie. Relief zips through her like lightning finding ground. There's still part 10 to live. There always is. But part 9 belongs to the moment a villain mistook theatrics for strategy and a mother mistook herself for someone who had to stay small. Turns out, both were wrong. A month later, Seattle wears its winter lights like jewelry. Strings of gold draped along the waterfront. The Space Needle lit in a way that makes it seem both grounded and impossibly far away. Grace steps out of the rideshare in front of the Caldwell Tech Gala, rain catching in her hair like punctuation. The building's glass facade mirrors the city behind her, but the reflection feels different tonight. She's not looking over her shoulder. Her dress is deep blue, silk soft, and rented from a thrift shop that has a gift for making second-hand feel like first choice. She'd spent a week altering the hem herself, pricking her fingers more than once, but now it sways exactly where she wants it to when she moves. The heels are borrowed from Pam at the cafe, slightly scuffed, but sturdy enough to survive whatever the night throws. Lily insisted on pinning a tiny silver star at the hip seam for luck, and Grace has left it there, hidden but present. Inside, the gala blooms with noise. The mingled scents of champagne and fresh flowers, the low thrum of a jazz trio in the corner, the clink of glass on glass. Waiters weave between clusters of black-tie guests, trays balanced like scales. Grace moves through it with a calm she didn't have the last time she wore anything this formal. Back then, events like this felt like exams she couldn't afford to fail. Tonight, she isn't here to pass. She's here to stand. Ethan finds her by the display of new Atria prototypes, his tuxedo neat but his tie already loosened. You clean up well, he says, and it's not the kind of compliment that expects repayment. So do you, she replies, letting the smile reach her eyes. They step aside as a photographer snaps a series of board member portraits. On the screens lining the far wall, headlines scroll, Caldwell Tech and NordicNet announce international partnership. Data security project nets 40 million dollars in new contracts. The room is thick with investors and press, but Grace doesn't flinch when a journalist's camera swings her way. Ethan gestures toward the balcony, and they slip out into the cool air. From here, the city looks like it's breathing, lights brightening and dimming with the rhythm of traffic, the harbor a dark pane streaked with ferry trails. The rain has stopped, leaving the air washed clean. Sometimes, Ethan says, leaning on the railing, the sea never calms. You just learn to sail. Grace studies the skyline, the place where the black water meets the brighter sky. Or you stop waiting for perfect weather, she says. You go out anyway. He glances at her, amused. That's a better quote. I should use it in the next press cycle. Don't, she says lightly. Some things get to stay mine. Behind them, the party swells as someone pops a champagne cork. The sound ricochets off the glass, almost like applause. Grace turns back to watch through the balcony doors. Mina is holding court near the dessert table, animatedly describing a new feature. Yash is mid-story with two security leads, his hands sketching diagrams in the air. Sophie is there too, in a simple black dress, standing beside Julio as they talk to a group from the DA's office. She catches Grace's eye across the room and nods once, an acknowledgement, not a plea. A month has changed a lot. Halstead's concerned parent whisper campaign died in the shadow of the criminal investigation. Mark's face has been absent from every industry event since the day security walked him out. Sophie's cooperation shaved years off the fight, though Grace knows her road back to steady work will be long. The thumb drive sits in a safe now, copies locked in legal archives. Ethan breaks the quiet. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said no that morning? If you'd stayed at the cafe? Grace thinks of Lily asleep in the fort, of the bread box hiding the evidence, of the storm pressing at the windows. I'd still be standing, she says, just in a smaller place. And now? Now I'm standing here. She leans on the railing, the city's hum in her bones. And I'm not planning on giving up the view. He raises his glass to that, the liquid inside catching the reflection of 1,000 points of light. To the view, he says. To the storm, she counters, and they clink. The balcony door swings open, and Lily darts out, her thrift store velvet dress swishing around her knees. Pam appears behind her, grinning and holding 2 flutes of sparkling cider. Your chaperone is restless, Pam teases. Lily grabs Grace's hand and tugs. Come see the big cake, she says. It's taller than me. Grace lets herself be pulled inside. The music is warmer now, the air rich with laughter and the scent of sugar. She stops by the cake table, crouches so she's level with Lily, and says, Want to know a secret? Tall doesn't always mean strong, and strong doesn't always mean tall. Lily tilts her head, thinking hard. Like you, she decides. Grace laughs, the sound unguarded, and pulls her daughter into a hug that lifts her off her feet. Cameras flash somewhere in the background, but she doesn't care. Let them take the picture. Let them write whatever caption they want. She knows the headline that matters. The storms didn't break me. They taught me how to stand steady on the deck. Later, as the speeches wind down and the city outside turns another shade darker, Grace slips back onto the balcony for a breath of quiet. The skyline stretches in every direction, rain-clean and open. She thinks of all the maps she's had to redraw, all the routes that started in places she never wanted to be. And she thinks of the next story she'll tell herself when the water gets rough again. You've sailed this sea before. You can do it again. She feels Lily's small hand slip into hers. No words, just the anchor of that touch. Grace closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them to the glittering sprawl of the city. The night is hers. The sea is hers. And for the first time in a long time, the wind feels like it's at her back,